The Greek soldiers who appear time and time again in stories were known as the Hoplites. Classicists like Christopher Mee and Philip de Souza theorized that hoplite warfare started around 720 BC. The items used as protection were the helmet, the spear, the greave, and the shield. Each of these items went through changes that developed due to their use in battle, and the changes occurred when appropriate. The first helmet used was the Corinthian helmet. It was made of bronze and was shaped to fit almost exactly to the bearer's head. Because it was so snugly fit to the head, and because it was the earlier ages of weapon making, the helmet restricted hearing and sight. To make these helmets, the craftsman would have possessed great skill, as it took literally beating the sheet of bronze into submission to form the helmet. Hoplites would also possess their main weapons as well as a backup or two. The main weapons were usually two spears made of wooden shafts that had bronze arrowheads on the end, and the backup weapon was usually a sword or a large dagger to use in case the spear broke.
The shields were commonly circular or figure-8 shaped, consisting of oxhide stretched over a wooden frame. They tended to be a meter in diameter. The porpax, also known as the armbands, and the antilabe, the hand grips, were made of materials such as leather. The entire shield would have weighed around 7 kilograms, or 15 pounds. Some hoplites would add arm or thigh guards to the armor, but those were rare as they were expensive. Hoplites also had the option to carry daggers and knives with them as well. A full set of armor, consisting of a shield, helmet, greaves, spear, and a sword, would have cost around 75 to 100 drachmas at the time. Keep in mind that a single day's wage was 1 drachma, so armor was pretty expensive. As the years progressed, so did the weaponry, and thus the Iron Age began. By the 10th century, most weapons were made of iron. It was a stronger material than bronze, but did cost more money, so bronze weaponry was still produced alongside the iron ones. Iron swords and spear tips were the most common. Out of all of the types of weaponry, very few iron arrowheads have been found throughout excavations. We do know that they exist though, as one was found buried in the shoulder of a soldier at Keramakos. Bronze shields became common. With a diameter of 3 feet, they would be large enough to protect half of the body of the user, along with half of the person next to him. Modifications began to be made to the armor as well. Helmets were made lighter, and linen corsets, with shoulder guards and flaps below the waist, would serve as the protection for the torso. The main weapon continued to be the spear, but modifications were made to include a counterweight. Short swords were still carried as backup in the case that the spear would break.
These changes would have been made due to the ever-popular and age-old technique of try and fail, as well as the adaptation to the changing fighting style of the commander and time.
In battle, hoplites would form a phalanx. Phalanxes were commonly made up of columns and rows of hoplite soldiers in rectangular formations that were, on average, 8 rows deep. The general term hoplite can be broken up into smaller categories of soldiers. Peltasts were the foot soldiers. These were the light-armed troops who couldn't afford the normal hoplite armor. They were named after their crescent-shaped wicker shields. They were often armed with javelins instead of spears, along with a short sword. These soldiers were often used for missions, such as hit-and-runs, ambushes, and reconnaissance. Hoplites were the general soldiers. In the 6th century, those who could afford a horse would ride their horse to the battle before dismounting for the actual fight. Cavalry would create another section of the battle that would fight alongside the hoplite soldiers. The cavalry would mainly use javelins. Some would wear armor, but as it would slow down the horse, most would go without.
With Philip II of Macedon around 359 BC came the Macedonian Phalanx. Inspired by the original Greek phalanx, much stayed the same in terms of smaller attributes. However, the formation, main weaponry, and the role of cavalry changed. Instead of marching in a square or rectangle, the phalanx now moved in a wedge formation, with barely 1 meter of space left between the men. The main weapon, the spear, evolved into the sarissa. Spears went from being, on average, 8 to 10 feet to being 18 to 24 feet. We can estimate the length of these spears based on depictions in art and the placement of the arrowheads of the spears in burial sites. Sarissas also had wooden shafts and iron butt spikes, or counterweights, on the opposite end as the arrowhead to provide balance. The iron tips of these spears were also much sharper than the hoplite spears and weighed 6 to 8 kilograms, or 13 to 17 pounds. The shield developed from a 3-foot in diameter circle to a smaller version attached by straps around the shoulder and wrist. Finally, you had the cavalry, which became more important under Alexander and Philip and had spears called ziston, which were shorter than the sphyrsa but longer than the original Greek hoplite spear.
Starting here. We are sad to say that weaponry such as impenetrable shields, lightning bolts, and plague arrows did not exist in the armory of the everyday hoplite. These parts of Greek warfare are often glorified through representations such as Homeric literature. Certain aspects of these depictions might be correct, but for the most part, they were playing up what the battles would have looked like. This video was a brief look at the evolution of the hoplites and their weaponry. We hope that it intrigued your interest in the topic of hoplites. If you would like to learn more in-depth information, feel free to check out Greek Archaeology, a Thematic Approach by Christopher Mee, and Engineering and Technology in the Classical World by Philip de Souza. Thanks for watching!